Good morning. It's time and we have a quorum. Let's get started with the special meeting of the panel on welfare services. Let's invite the administration and deputations in. Today, we will follow on one of the items from the meeting on the 10th of April. And the topic is estate-based social welfare services planning. 22 deputations have signed up, and 18 of them would be present today. And more deputations are arriving. They will talk about the welfare needs of new housing estates and the current inadequacies. And papers from different deputations have been tabled. And members from the panel on housing are also invited. Welcome. Today we have the Social Welfare Department, Housing Department, and Education Bureau. And a number of deputations have arrived, and I believe a lot of them are here for the first time. So I'd like to issue some reminders to deputations. First of all, we have headphones and speakers. Channel 0 is floor, Channel 1 Cantonese, Channel 2 English, Channel 3 Putonghua. If you do not know how to use the speakers, you can ask our staff for help. And based on the order of your seats, I will invite you to speak. And each of you will have 3 minutes, so please make the best use of the time. I will try to be lenient, but I will remind you at the 3-minute mark. Please be reminded that your speeches will not be protected by the electoral powers and privileges ordinance Cap 382 and the relevant protections and exemptions. Your submissions would also not be protected. For observers, please take note note for members of the public attending meetings in conference rooms or observing meetings in public galleries. If necessary, our staff will issue reminders. If you have copies of your speeches, you can hand them over now or after the meeting. They will be shared with all panel members. I will first invite the administration to walk us through the paper before we open up the floor for deputations, and after that the administration will make a response. If time allows, I will allow you to make follow-up comments or questions. Mr. Lem Katai, Deputy Director, thank you. On the 10th of April, at the panel meeting, we had a lengthy discussion on this topic, and we received a lot of views from comments. And there were a few areas of concern. First of all, for new public rental housing estates, and what would be the planning of welfare premises, and after new housing estates are completed, can our welfare services facilities dovetail with the developments based on the existing mechanism for new development areas of sites with a potential of developing public housing? The government would consider comments from the district, and we will look at the supply of the non-domestic areas of the developments on the overall demand for welfare facilities and the GFA requirements, as well as convenience of access, as well as constraints stipulated by the Housing Department or Planning Department, and we will come up with the right mix of community and welfare facilities. And another area of concern was, once the new estates are completed, would the welfare facilities go according to plan? After the last meeting, the SWD worked with the Housing Department, and before the move-in permit is issued for any new housing estate, we will ask the relevant government departments to start operating the service. And we hope that after the occupation permit is issued, the facilities can be commissioned no later than 7 months. And if only simple renovation works are required, I think they can be commissioned even earlier. So that is a response to the comments from members last time. So perhaps we will take in views from deputations. Thank you very much. So are you saying that improvements have been made since the last meeting for new public rental housing estates on social welfare facilities? We will identify NGOs as soon as possible, and hopefully after the occupation permit is issued, the services can commence within 7 months. So do you mean that existing estates like On-Tai Estate will not be covered? Those estates have been completed, so our planning back then was a bit different. Nonetheless, we will take on board members' comments and implement a new system in our new estates. I will now hand over to our deputations. First, Mr. McChicken from the Civic Party. Thank you. For older housing estates, their planning were much better than the new ones. For Nansha Estate, and on different floors, there are different social welfare facilities, for example, child respite center, youth centers, elderly centers, etc. All these would support the needs of residents. But in recent years, planning of estates have been inadequate. For Tin Shui Wai estates, the welfare services are provided by the integrated family service centers, and that has increased the workload of frontline social workers, and it will be difficult for them to support the residents. And for residents in these estates, many of them are new immigrants. They face a number of family issues, but since they do not have good networks, it's hard to seek help, and that has led to a lot of domestic tragedies. The housing department did not reserve enough sites for social welfare NGOs. For On-Tai Estate in Kwun Tong, there are 20 to 30,000 residents, but they are only receiving services from the neighborhood elderly centers and integrated family services centers. The lack of service centers mean that social workers can only meet residents in parks or in fast food shops. And very often residents have to visit other estates. They have to walk up to 30 minutes, and this is really inconvenient for them. For Kai Cheng Estate and Tek Long Estate in Kowloon City, even though they were commissioned in 2013, the family service centers are still located in To Kwa Wan. And if residents need help, they have to rely on the SWD outreach team. And the reason is that the housing department did not reserve enough space for social welfare facilities. Our party feels that the administration must review the planning in new housing estates, and in 2030, in Northeast NT and West NT and Hong Shui Kiu, we will see a number of new housing estates. So can the government step up resources and set up social worker teams to help existing estates? The SWD and HD should enhance communication. Would there be any vacant spaces in existing estates which can be replanned into social welfare uses? For any new estates in the future, apart from the ground floor, podium, and lower floors, various social welfare facilities should be offered. Mr. Mack, you talked about providing services on benches. I think we have. I think other deputations can speak on that. Ms. Lau Wai Ki, the Christian Family Service Center. I'm in the social worker team at On Tat Estate and On Tai Estate. Since last year, we started providing move-in consultation service. And we have dealt with more than 400 cases, and over the past years, we made the following observations. First of all, a lot of residents have never used social welfare services before. So through home visits, well, they would see us during when they move in, and residents told us that they need some help. However, we realize that existing services have not catered for these people. And when we conducted research, we found that more than 80% of the residents at On Tat Estate used to live in other districts, so they are not familiar with Kwun Tong. So very often their family issues from the past would persist. So when they moved homes, very often these issues would be triggered, and that led to a lot of disputes and family issues. And we also met visually handicapped or persons with disability, and we saw all kinds of issues. The government must understand that their problems wouldn't just go away after they are assigned public housing. So the government should tackle these issues. And we know a blind person in On Tat Estate. He could not make it here, but we would like to play a recording from him.
After he has moved into On Tat Estate, there have been some social workers who helped him, but he had difficulties in terms of accessing the community facilities. How long is that recording? It's about 30 seconds. When he showed me around, he said that when you cross the road, there will not be any beeping sound. So you need to listen carefully. If there are no vehicles, if you hear that there are no vehicles coming from both sides, you just cross the road. So I really feel very helpless when I dash across the road. Sometimes the cars are so quiet and I can't hear them coming. So, I mean, things can go wrong very easily. I'm really, scared and don't know what to do. I haven't yet moved into the estate yet. I blame my husband. I told him that if any accident should happen to me, well, he may need to come and collect my corpse. So I hope that the officials will really address this issue. The lady who made that recording, who taught her to dash across the road like that? Well, she actually was receiving some social welfare services. So one trainer helped her to move into the new PRH unit. And we found out that the facilities there were not really catering to the needs of the blind, so there were no facilities to help him when he wanted to cross the road, so he could only listen to see whether there's any vehicles coming before he crossed the road. So this is a visually impaired person. He simply couldn't, adapt to the environment, and every time he need to go to the bus stop, he need to make a long detour. He need to walk for half an hour before he could reach the bus stop. We asked the housing department to explain whether or not in the design manuals they should provide for access for the visually impaired. What about your office? I heard that it's very difficult for you to find an office. Well, the design of a service is such that we don't have any offices. If the Kaifongs want to find us, they have arranged for an MAC room where we could meet them. The new MAC has not yet been formed, so we're given a temporary room. For the moment, it's about 160 square feet in size. When the Kaifongs come to us, they can only talk to us outside the door, and when a few Kaifongs come, they can only get at the doorstep, or we can meet them in the park. So it's not very convenient, especially when we talk about issues covering personal privacy. It's not very convenient. So that is already accommodation on the part of the mentioned company, allowing you to use the MAC office. So on every block there is a room designated for the use of MACs. But since the MACs have not yet been formed, so they allow us to use it for the time being. I think we have to thank the housing department for that arrangement first. Mr. Leung Man Kwong is next. Thank you. Having heard the other deputations, and we've just heard about the social workers being allowed to use the MAC office temporarily. I'd like to point out that other than the need for good planning for new PRH development, I think there are also problems we need to look at during the intake stage. When the housing authority plans for the intake of a new PRH estate, they will liaise with government departments and welfare organizations to find out and to deal with the plan, the service provision for the district. But when the population intake actually takes place, there's always a lack of space, and welfare organizations have to meet the clients, on the street and so on. In so estate, for example, during the population intake, many welfare organizations had to simply put up a booth within the estate. There's no temporary accommodation given to them. So in planning for the population intake for these estates, we've all along hoped that the housing department could allow space for the welfare agencies to cater to those who are moving in. Very often the MBC would only be formed after 1.5 years of the intake. So in the absence of an MBC and where there's absence of welfare facilities, this is the period during which problems may occur. So for premises which have not yet being used, I think the housing department should make it a standing policy to allow welfare agencies to use these premises before the MAC is formed, so that during the interim, organizations which are experienced in helping people during the intake to offer them, proper welfare services. In terms of manpower resources, I say you can make reference of what the Housing Department had done before, that is hiring an estate liaison officer. In the early 1990s, there was an estate elderly service project, and the project mainly aims to serve the elderly, including home visits, and when there is liaising with the elderly, when the lift service is suspended or water supply is suspended and so on. But now, the responsibility is now falling onto the shoulders of the frontline social workers, or of the integrated family service centers, or the housing managers. The social workers are under a lot of pressure because they have to handle many cases. The housing department staff and the management office may not be able to find out very quickly whether there are any problems or any cases would need to be referred to professional social workers. I hope you will make reference with good experience and recreate a post of estate liaison officers to cater to the needs of the different residents. If they could set up this post in the housing department with an officer who has training in welfare services, then I think you will be able to better serve the residents. Mr. Choi Kin Yam. Mr. Lam talked about the seamless, handover of the PRH estates. We have a question for the Housing Department and the SWD. After the residents have been allocated to a PRH unit, could you analyze the data? For example, could you analyze the age profile, the ethnicity of the residents, the incomes, and also what Ms. Lau referred to, that is whether or not they are residents moving into the estate from within the same district or from outside. People who move in from other districts may not be able to adapt to the new community. So between the government departments, after you've confirmed the allocation of a unit, PRH unit to a household, could you share the data of these residents with the Housing Department and the SWD? Another deputation also mentioned that during the interim period, could the Housing Department allow the Kai Phong associations and so to use the vacant premises and allow the welfare agencies to move in there first so that they can step in at an earlier stage. According to the minutes of previous meetings, I'm also a social worker myself. To ask the IFCC colleagues to go to a new district, they may not know the district very well. They cannot provide outreaching service at the same time. It may take them a long time to go to the residents, to the estate. So could you allow them to move into these vacant premises so that they can serve the residents at an earlier stage? Many organizations now use mobile vans to provide service. I just want to fill this gap. You can make reference of, for example, what the Port Royal Hospital is doing, providing a mobile van to provide TCM service. For example, social workers cannot meet the residents in McDonald's or on a footbridge and so on because of privacy issues. Thank you. Thank you. You talk about the sharing of community profiles. I'm sure they've conducted the analysis, but I don't know whether or not they've shared them with others. Next, Mr. Ng Koi from the Christian Family Service. Good morning. Today, I'd like to urge the government to set up a new PRH estate support project. In 2008, the Housing Authority had set up a pilot scheme in Tin Shui Wai in order to tie in with the completion of the new estates in Tin Shui Wai. From 2010 to 2012, the scheme was expanded to Yuen Long and Tung Chung. The pilot was completed in 2012. According to past records, some LegCo members then also had challenged the decision. According to a report at the time, the Housing Department explained that The setting up of these teams was due to the fact of the tragedy at Tin New Estate in 2007. The purpose of setting up the team is to provide support to the people who are moving into the estates and help them build up a community network. Although the housing department had, suspended the plan, but because the demand for services dropped after the population intake. Well, the conclusion by the housing department has confirmed the, value, the merit of these, new estate support teams. And these are the work that the teams would do during the first 3 to 5 years after the intake. In 2016, we are now given support funding by the Jockey Club to improve upon the new estate support service model, and we're able to access 90% of the kai fongs and provide referral services. This mode of service under the estate support project should be community-based. The social workers are relying on different tactics to serve them. We want to help the residents, build up a congenial community. In the course of our work, we may need to touch on welfare and housing issues. For example, before the intake, we will already have moved into the estate to be ready for the intake, and we will only, focus our service during the first few years after the intake. And what is important is that we work with other departments and NGOs. The profession has already been talking about this service model for a long time. So there's no certainty where our resources will come from. But anyway, whatever the resources may come from, there are certain things we must do. First of all, the service team has to work together with the housing department, the management company, the SWD, and the NGOs. Secondly, these teams would be, should be able to work independently in house PRH estates of different sizes. Such teams should be set up in all such estates. Thank you. I think that is a very specific proposal. Perhaps the housing department could explain why you, suspended the pilot scheme in 2012. And the SWD, could you also explain about the feasibility of this pilot scheme? They're talking about a designated, independent and designated team. Could you respond to that? Next, Mr. Chen Wing Sun from the Council of Social Services. Good morning. In the communication between the Council of Social Services and the profession, we've been talking about the team for a long time. In the course of a discussion, we all arrived at the conclusion that people moving into a new estate, they're not just moving into a PRH unit. So in our communication with the profession, we suggested that the government should, after the completion of the new PRH estate, they should set up a social worker team for 5 years. Under the Community Investment and Care Fund in 2015-2016, they've really approved 12 such PRH estates as points of service. The government, I think, would not question the need for such services, which is based on centered around social workers to help the residents build up their community network and start life in a new environment. The service will last for 3 years, and it's not enough. The government talk about this family service model, and the government talks about prevention, providing support, and remedial services. So there's such a large demand for service within these new estates, so the model simply cannot cope.
It takes time to build relationships, and the same goes for the neighborhood. So setting up a 5-year social worker team for new housing estates would allow residents to foster a harmonious community. And for vulnerable residents, we can enhance referral and professional support. And that way we can reinforce our professional services, and they dovetail with the existing ones. And the HKCSS is a platform for communication. And when the government explores a new social worker team, we are happy to provide feedbacks. For the existing integrated family services, and they are specific in nature to tackle existing problems. For the new social worker team, the approach is preventative. That's all I want to say. Thank you. The HACSS proposes a 5-year social worker team rather than a 3-year service. And Ms. Cheng Lai Mui from the Parent Association for the Severely Mentally Handicapped. We are a self-help parent organization, and we would fight for the rights of the severely mentally handicapped. According to thematic report number 62, there are 578,000 persons with disability in Hong Kong in 2013, and there were another 10.1 thousand mentally handicapped persons, and as of October 2016, there were 310 residential care homes for the disabled, including 223 subsidized, 18 self-financing, and 68 private homes, providing about 17,000 places, serving 15.8 thousand PWDs. We have at least 570,000 PWDs in our community. That's why estate-based support is extremely important. The severely mentally handicapped face different challenges, including narrow spaces, lack of leisure facilities, dining out, wheelchairs, medical facilities, etc. All these support are not enough. Nonetheless, a lot of parents told us that they hope to live together in the society or the community with their children if possible, so that they won't have to send their children to care homes. We feel that to conduct social welfare service planning, we need to think about the daycare centers for the severely handicapped, as well as district support centers and integrated support services. To implement estate-based social welfare planning, we feel that everything starts with housing planning. We realize that in new public housing estates, the government has not reserved enough space to develop different services. A lot of old estates are now being managed by private organizations, and the high rents would be unaffordable for charities. Some district residents are again setting up services for the disabled, and this would increase the workload on carers. The government should request developers to reserve units for subsidized services, and that should be included in the land lease conditions. The services should be more comprehensive, and now there's a severe shortage of daycare centers and district support centers, and the services cannot satisfy the needs of the severely disabled, for example, taking a shower, etc. There's a lack of round-the-clock support services, so in case of emergencies, parents cannot take care of their children at home. And respite and day respite services are also lacking. Very often, they can only receive services in other districts, and they cannot receive services during school holidays. And the service level in Tung Chung is almost zero. We should expand our home care services so that more parents can choose to take care of their children at home, and there's a lack of planning for estate-based homes, and due to long waiting time, location is no longer a choice, and a lot of children are sent to somewhere far from their homes. We realize that a lot of parents do not know how to seek help, and they have become reclusive. The government should introduce the relevant services to parents so that even the reclusive families can receive information. The government should review the Hong Kong planning standards and guidelines to stipulate the percentage of service facilities for PWDs so that all public and housing estate would have enough space and facilities. And support should be given to NGOs and offer cheap rents so that they can provide services in the community. And 3, additional lease conditions should be given to private developers so that space would be reserved for social services. How much more do you need? You're behind schedule for 2 minutes already. My apologies. All right, thank you very much. You talked about the service needs of PWDs in new estates. So perhaps they would talk about the provision of disabled homes in On-Tai Estate, Tat Long Estate, etc. So please address that. Mr. Hao Kun Lam from the Social Worker Renaissance Movement. Mr. Lam said that after review there would be new planning. You said that there are new plans for the new housing estates and that you have learned some lessons. For existing estates like On-Tai and On-Tai estates, apparently your new plans do not cover these existing estates. So does it mean that these estates have to suffer while new estates can enjoy the new plans? So this is something we must think about. As other deputations suggested, there are service needs in places like Shui Chino Estate. By 2020, we will have 70,000 new public housing units, and new planning must be offered for these estates. We do not want to see repeats of On-Tai or On-Tai estates where residents have to leave their district for services. The government said they will provide appropriate services, but is this really the case? For residents who move in, they have to seek services in other districts, and they face a multitude of problems. It's about adjusting to the community. They should not have to seek services only when they run into problems. We have to build a support network as well. The current approach is not preventative at all. If they have adjustment issues, even for plans like the CIIF, the services would not be enough. For a lot of tragedies or suicides, if community support had been given, the likelihood would go down. Would the government assign social worker teams to new housing estates? And the social workers would be able to map residents to the right services, and neighborhood support should be given, and they can encourage residents to offer their comments on the new on their new homes. the government should review the social worker planning for new housing estates. More resources and facilities should be given to satisfy the needs. Thank you. Mr. Li Wai-chung from the Hong Kong Christian Service Unit. Good morning. We are from On-Tat Estate and we carry out children services in the park. I think deputations have talked about about the shortage of services and facilities, and I want to talk about something else. At On-Tat Estate, there is a collaboration model, and 5 social work teams are providing services for children, new immigrants, etc. But manpower is lacking, and so is space. However, we still try to do our best, and we want to tell the government that this model actually works. And 1 year before moving in, the SWD allowed us to get involved in the when the residents moved in, and the property management office and housing and estate office of On-Tat Estate were cooperative, and we were able to provide services outside. And On-Tat Estate allowed social workers to come before the residents moved in. So it was a novel attempt. Early this year, we conducted a review on our services, and it showed that social worker teams can allow children to enjoy a safe environment and know about their surroundings. So the satisfaction rate was 90%. We also interviewed different stakeholders, including the property managers, the frontline HD officers, school principals, political parties, cleaners. They all told me that the social worker teams are important. We have 3 recommendations. First, the new estate-based support services should last 5 years, starting from 1 year before move-in. We need 1 year to prepare ahead of move-in, and in the next 3 years, we have to provide various support services, including case management. The final year would be for coordination and referrals. We need dedicated teams. We need dedicated teams for specific housing estates. Whenever we have a new housing estate, the utility providers and various contractors all have dedicated space, so the same should go for us. As I said, the model at On-Tat Estate has been very effective, so why can't it be extended to other housing estates? What are the reasons? The government officials have had very good experience. Are you going to extend it or expand it? Thank you.
So we are coming down to specifics. The on-dot operation model, could it be replicated in other districts? Of course, sometimes Mr. Lee was serving the clients, on the street, and he's providing, such quality service. And this year, he's been awarded the best social worker. So perhaps you can, take into consideration his suggestions. Next, Ms. Yip Lai Sim. Chairman and honorable members and officials, I'm a mother living in On-Tat Estate. I have 2 children. Since they did well in their original schools, I did not arrange for them to change their schools when I moved in. Every day I have to take them to school by bus. Today I would like to take this opportunity to ask the officials whether or not you've actually gone to On-Tat Estate to find out about the real situation there. since October last year when I moved in. It's been 10 months, and every morning at 6:30 I would queue up at the bus stop. And already there would be a long queue there. When the bus arrives, we all panic because the bus would already have been full already. We wouldn't know. Wouldn't know whether we would be able to board the bus, and those who cannot would start accusing each other and yelling at the passengers on board to actually move inside the bus so that more people could get on. People don't want to quarrel, but if they cannot board the bus, and we don't know whether they could board the next bus as well. So every morning is like a battle. Also, regarding the shopping centers, I move into second phase of the estate. I don't go for window shopping. I just want to buy my groceries, and it already takes me 1.5 hours. I have really regretted moving into this estate. I understand that whenever you have a new estate, there will be shortcomings. I've been looking forward to a new market in our estate. But once the new market was commissioned, I was shocked. There were so few stores. There were only a few of them. And there's one fish store, one vegetable store, one pork meat store. We don't even have beef or fish for sale. I don't know whether you've actually been to a market and you don't know what to shop. And this market serves more than 20,000 people. So like the officials, when you design the person who designed the market, have they really considered the needs of the residents and how they would feel? Fortunately, our estate is different from other estates because we have a group of conscientious social workers. They've been helping us since we took the key to move into the estate. They help us through the initial, stage after we've moved in. But every time, so if we have to wait until a tragedy has happened before we approach them, that is not really helpful at all. We really want social workers to be able to be accessible, to help us to face the difficulties we encounter. So, and to help us, get acquainted with other kaifongs, and I'm really grateful to them. So I have two demands. First of all, when the government plan any PRH estate developments, could the government provide for comprehensive support facilities? Otherwise, even if you offer us a palace, it wouldn't really be any good. I hope the government will allow the social workers to continue to implement the new estate social worker support services. Finally, I'd like to thank all the social workers who had actually served the residents working on the street in On-Tat Estate. I've also heard people saying that if you're allocated a PRH unit, it's like you won the Mark 6 lottery. But we've just heard that if you need to take the bus, you want to, buy your groceries, it's such a hassle. Next, Ms. Wong Si-nga, or yes, I'm a chairman. Honorable members and officials, good morning. I am Wong Si-nga. I'm 7. Today, I'd like to talk about the several thousand, primary and secondary school kids in On-Tat Estate. There are only 3 basketball courts. Is enough. When I play basketball with my elder brother, we will be hit by we will see more than 10 balls, shooting at the ring at the same time. I never had a chance to really be able to shoot the ball. There is a small shopping center. There's not even a shop selling clothing. So we find it very inconvenient. Inside the shopping center, there are only 4 eateries, 1 restaurant, 1 Hong Kong-style restaurant, 1 Japanese restaurant, and 1 fast food store. But we have more than 20,000 people living in the estate. If we want to go for dim sum, we have to wait for more than 2 hours. Going to a Japanese restaurant, we have to wait for 1 hour. If we just want to have a meal. Why is it such a hassle? I hope when the government build these new estates, they will provide for more facilities such as swimming pools, parks, a large shopping center, and libraries to cater to the needs of children and the elderly, and that there should be enough space so that there wouldn't be any conflict or disputes among the residents. Thank you. Yeah, we thank you as well. Okay, we've heard you loud and clear. Next, Ms. Leung Wing Yen, Chairman, members. So I'm a frontline social worker serving on the project I work on is supported by the Jockey Club. In the last 3 years, we have the residents of 2 estates to build the community networks and to build up the neighborly mutual help system. I've worked there for 2 years as a frontline social worker. I've learned that we really provide extensive service within the estates. Other than having to support the Kai Fongs when they encounter economic difficulties, and we would ask for information, we should be able to provide them immediately. We also help them address, urgent issues like the children having to change schools and so on. We have not conducted an official survey, but several hundred children had actually transferred to schools in Kwun Tong, on Sai Kung, or Chung Kwan O upon our referrals. Family issues, marital problems, and there are also even cases where the clients are suffering from depression and so on, and when they move to a new community, it will trigger, an outbreak of the onset of the disease and so on. So we place a lot of focus on helping build up a neighborly relationship among the residents, to help them build up a network of mutual help. I hope the officials understand that these residents, they come from different districts in Hong Kong, and they all have their own families. There also is singletons, senior citizens, and people with disabilities. When they come to the new estate, they would be severed from the previous support networks. Many Kai Fong soldiers, when they move in, initially they don't know anybody. They don't even know whether to say good morning to the next door neighbors. They don't know how to communicate with them. They really find themselves very, very helpless. When they move in the new estate, they have all kinds of problems to overcome, especially for parents. They may not need to approach for social workers for help at the integrated family service centers, but I have seen, but they really, they don't mind actually, approaching the social workers or serving them on the streets within the estate, and share with them the difficulties that they are facing and so on, and relieve their frustration. Some Kai Fong said that they may not even talk to the social workers about the problems or frustrations. Very often on Saturdays, we will place a booth on Saturday with toys there. Parents will go there to share the experiences or to vent out the frustrations. Some Kai Fongs have just moved in, and they will share the experience with other newcomers. In the last year, we've worked like social workers. We organized different activities for the Kai Fongs to leverage on their own strengths to work as volunteers to help other residents. We also have a suggestion. We hope the government can really address the need for service by the new residents of new estates. Planning is not just planning for what sort of welfare organizations should be stationed there. Welfare services should be planned and provided before the intake, so that the residents, when they move in, will get sufficient support. Next, Mr. Wong Kwai Sang. I have a clip which is in Putonghua. In Hong Kong, now first of all, some residents in Hong Kong don't have the status as residents, and through the Bill of Rights, which also is applicable in the UK, and it overrides the Chinese constitution and the basic law. the UK will not need to report to the Chinese. Well, this is a documentary produced by the CCTV, giving us the right of a boat in the UK. Well, some members belong to the FC sector, but I see that all the members present today are not yet returned from GC constituencies. I am an FC, a candidate, but you're also in support of direct election. Before I came, I heard the Chief Secretary saying that he will consult the district councils. All the district councillors belong to a few major political parties. Last week we saw many organizations, celebrating the handover, and they monopolize all the activities. And TVDB is a part of that as well. In the 1990s, they will help the Tonghua group of hospitals to raise funds. But nowadays, Jiang Xiaoming can sell his own painting for several tens of millions of dollars. There are many elderly people living in their PRH estates. I used to be a warden of the home of the elderly. At that time, even the members of the Legislative Yuan from Taiwan would come to visit. Mr. Siu, I'm very happy that we have someone from the Education Bureau present here today as well. For the parents of children with mental problems, they're under a lot of pressure. At the estate office, you have this booklet for new immigrants to Hong Kong. If they have children suffering from mental diseases, I hope the Education Bureau. Well, this is published by Caritas. After the handover, since you have so much funding, I think you can help, organize some, film screening session at City Hall. Next, Mr. Chow Chi-ming, at Hong Fuk Estate, people have already moved in there for 2 years, and the estate is facing a serious shortage of social welfare services and facilities. There is only one elderly neighborhood center at the estate, and there is also a center for youth, for young people, but they have not even started to fit out the center for young people, and the residents don't even know where it is located. And in the community facility, the community hall within the estate, only the car park is operating. I'll give some examples. Within the estate, there are many families or households with working parents, especially single-parent homes. They really have great need for custody service for the children, but we do not have such facilities to serve them. The residents living in the estate face many issues like others who move into the new estate. There are emotional issues. There may be family problems for which they need the support of social workers or support from the community centers. At Hong Fuk Estate, it's been 2 years since the intake, and still we don't have such facilities to serve the residents. For these residents, how do they, fend for themselves? They may approach some of the workers they knew before they moved into the estate and ask them for help. Doesn't that show that we have a serious problem here? That is, after they move into a new estate, they still need to go to the place where they used to live and find a social worker who served them there previously for help. The department has said that they've now conducted a review, and for newly planned PRH estates there will be improvements. Does that mean that for estates like Hong Fuk, they would have to put up with the inadequacies in the management of these estates on the part of the department?
我哋都希
On the inadequacies, we hope the government can create an estate social worker team for 5 to 6 years, and outreach services can be provided to the residents. Even though you are not able to provide community centers, at least you can take out this measure to help the residents. Thank you. Next, Ms. Tam Oi Ling from the concerned group against building a refuge station from Hong Fuk residents. Good morning. We are against the construction of a refuge station, and I want to talk about the shortage of schools and shops at Hong Fuk Estate. Hong Fuk Estate looks very nice, and there is a lot of greening, but there's a shortage of facilities. At the beginning, we didn't even have a kindergarten, but we have a lot of young children, so we do have a need for a kindergarten. We only had one recently. A lot of parents had to take their kids to schools in other housing estates. In Hong Shui Kiu, there is only one primary school, and it's a 20-minute walk from Hong Fuk Estate. And very often, children have to go to Tuen Mun, Yuen Long, Tin Shui Wai, and they have to take the light rail. But during busy hours, we only have single-car trains, and it's very hard to get on. Some residents also talk about the problems at Hong Fuk Estate. There are only 3 restaurants, but we have 12,000 people at Hong Fuk Estate. So the restaurants could not meet our needs. We don't even have one ATM, and if we need to withdraw money, we have to walk a very long way. So all these are very inconvenient for us. So we can see that there's a lack of proper planning. I understand that you want the people to move in as soon as possible, but at least you have to get the planning done properly. Hopefully you can introduce more community facilities. For example, schools, transportation arrangement, etc., in order to help the residents. Thank you. Thank you. So indeed, we are not just worried about on-tai estate. We would also pay attention to Kai-Ching and Kai-Ching estates, etc. Mr. Chen Yu-K from the General Chamber of Social Enterprises. We are looking at a holistic planning issue which spans the entire territory. Over the past year, we got in touch with colleagues working in different housing estates, and we realized that they face the same issues. We approached Shushino Estate, Kai-Ching Estate, So Estate, On-Tai Estate, and so on and so forth. We saw that residents were facing very similar issues. For example, transportation. They have to wait a very long time for their buses in the morning, and many of these estates lack markets, and very often big stores, big chains like 7-Eleven and parking shops serve a very big population. And our colleagues also face a lot of difficulties. On-Tat Estate is relatively good because there are 5 social worker teams, but for most other new estates like Hongfu Estate and Shuichunou Estate, they only have 1 to 2 CIF teams, and there are no service units. We met the former Secretary Siu Wai-keung, and they said that for service periods of 5 years or less, no service units would be assigned. So I'd like to know whether this is the policy and is there any room for change? Does it mean that the service teams would not have offices? A lot of issues require intervention from social workers. Other deputations talked about setting up dedicated teams for early intervention services. We feel that the new estate social worker teams need to help relay comments about planning from residents. This is equally important. When we met the government before, they said it belonged to the ambit of the Home Affairs Bureau or HAD. I think the HAD, SWD, and HD all have a part to play. So I think all 3 should be involved in the planning of new housing estates. And I think the service period of the new social worker teams should be 5 to 6 years. And Ms. Wong Wing Lam from the Hong Folk Residents Group of the General Chamber of Social Enterprises. Transportation is a problem. I'd like to talk about light rail. Light rail is crucial for Hong Folk residents and it's commonly used. We only have 1 light rail station, which is Hong Shui Kiu Station. For Hong Folk residents, we have 10,000 residents, so would 1 station be enough? A lot of residents move in from Tin Shui Wai, and many of them would travel to Tin Shui Wai to get in touch with their friends. And they can only choose route number 751 if they take the light rail. But route 751 only adopts single-car trains, and very often people have to wait a long time before they can get on. And there are only 4 to 5 trains per day in some cases, and this is inconvenient for the people. And there are no transportation options to NT East. Many residents were from Fanling or Shangshui, and the bus headways are inadequate, and very often people cannot get on. We have to think about external connectivity. Without proper transportation planning, how can people build their networks and offer productivity? Hong Shui Kiu is designated a new development area by the government, and we will have an even bigger population in the future, and transportation will the burden will spiral out of control. This is an imminent problem, and for Tin Shui Wai, can we have circular routes for the light rail, or can we have more bus routes? This reveals a lack of holistic planning. If the government adopts the same approach and continues to take a piecemeal approach, these problems will only repeat themselves. We hope the government can help the residents. Thank you. Public transportation is within the ambit of the THB. Unfortunately, there are no THB representatives today, but we will help follow up on your question. Ms. Ho Chung-hwa from the Cheung Lung Wai Estate Concern Group. Shenglongwai Estate is located in Shangshui, right? Yes. And perhaps not a lot of people would know about it. We have 2 blocks, and we have about 1,600 units. And we are near Qinghe Estate, which also lacks planning. Our residents have to share a single set of resources, and we are really segregated. We have a total population of 23,000. There are 3 restaurants, including Café de Coral. At Qinghe Estate, there are tea cafes and Chinese restaurants, but the lunch would cost up to at least $40,000, $40. And we have a bakery at each of the estates, but they are from the same group. And we have a grocery, and at Qinghe Estate there is a Tai Cheng and Park and Shop. But there's monopoly. There's no competition. There are no options for us. We have to put up with bad quality and high prices, and the elderly cannot reach Shakuhe, so they are forced to accept these commodities, and the prices are too high for most families. Even, well, if we try to buy a pineapple bun in the railway station, it only takes $3.5. So what about the community facilities? At Shenglongwai Estate, there's a complex for integrated services, and the first 2 services are for the mentally handicapped, and there's another integrated center. And the intake was early 2016, but the services only started in the end of the year. So if we require services, we have to walk to Qinghe Estate or reach Shengshui MTR station, and we have to share the same facilities with other residents. And we ask about meal delivery services, and we are always put on waiting lists. So we have to walk to Qinglong Estate all the time. From Qinglong Estate to the Park and Shop, it takes 7 to 8 minutes. But for the elderly, they have to walk 15 minutes. And the area is not sheltered, and there are no seats along the way. If you want more choices, you have to go back to Shangshui Station. Cycling is one option. There are taxis at Shenglongwai Estate, but they are few and far in between. And there are no interchange concessions for the bus routes, and the main junctions are always congested, and it takes more than 1 hour to reach another part of Shangshui, and there's a lack of population planning. And for the 4th phase of Shenglongwai Chun, if you do not plan properly, you will create even higher burden for service units and residents. The government has a responsibility to help the residents, and they cannot ignore the population just because it's small. It should replan the new estates properly. Thank you very much. So you reminded me that even the smaller estates face issues. So I think this has become the norm. Mr. Ng Kwan Lim, the Alliance to Monitor Welfare Planning in Public Estates. Deputations talked about different issues with new estates, and we are looking at welfare or community planning, and this is about policy formulation. I'm not sure why we only have representatives from the SWD and HD. What about representatives from the Bureau?
And the problem has not just arisen today. Since the panel meeting in April, we understand that LegCo has invited representatives from Bureau to attend the meeting today, but they're still not here. Does it mean that they will continue to ignore the issue? We are grateful to the officials attending the meeting this morning, But in your response later on, if you told us that this is not within your it's not within your authority to deal with these issues, then I think the Bureau is putting you on the spot. I hope that you will relay the message back to the Bureau that is all the deputations are willing and would like to invite the Labour and Transport and Housing and also the Labour and Welfare Bureau to meet with us. I hope that they can give a written reply. Regarding issues facing residents moving into new estates, the residents come from different districts. They have different needs to adapt. They could have lived in subdivided flats and they move into a peerage units. When they move into estates, they come with all kinds of problems and issues. And they've left their previous community, moving into this new estate. They have yet to build up their own community networks. To cope with this new environment, we need facilities to cater to the needs, and for that we need social workers to help them build up community networks and relationships and relay the aspirations to the authorities. The former director, Mr. Siu, was aware of such needs, and you've also said that you will arrange for the DO. Some of our peers have told us that you have arranged for the district officers to coordinate with other departments and bid for funding to offer services. Since you are coordinating other departments to other organizations to provide such service, why can't you make it a regular service? Why can't there be social worker teams who can provide service in the short term? I hope that the government will, for organizations bidding for funding, you can, make arrangements for them to move into the estates to provide service. There should be standing social worker teams who serve the Kaifongs for 5 or 6 years in the community, and to help them really build up a healthy community. In the long term, at the community level, at the social service level, the government needs a long-term plan. So you don't need now to know what is the size of the population, what sort of service they need. Many Kaifongs told us, for example, that at Kai Ting Estate, they have to go to Tokawan to find a family service center, and this is not really too accessible for them. Thank you. To supplement, we have invited the Labour and Welfare Bureau to attend, but we've not invited the Transport and Housing Bureau. But the Housing Department is present today. The new Secretary, Mr. Chen Fan, perhaps our members can follow up, on your behalf, and relay your concerns to him. Next, Mr. Lam Ka-fai, I'd like to talk about the welfare needs at the community level. We talk about the model at On Tat Estate. I really appreciate this bottom-up approach. For the newly established peerage estates, there is a serious shortage of community facilities. Some deputations mentioned Chiang Wai Estate, which only have 2 blocks. In Chung Kwan O, in the last few years, we have newly commissioned peerage estates, Yiming Chin and Sin Ming estates. They all have either 2 or 3 housing blocks. But the supporting facilities would only be allowed for 1 or 2 welfare facilities, like centers for the elderly or centers for drug abusers or addicts. So the residents will have to go to housing estates in the vicinity to seek, help from welfare, organizations. And it shows that there is a serious shortage of community facilities. In the administration's paper for Legislative, They mentioned, we understand that for a site earmarked for PRH development, there will be a community facility, a complex to be built. But they will only be used to provision some welfare facilities from other districts. And there will be a center for the elderly and also a site earmarked for, children with special education needs. So they might have ignored the needs of the people who've just moved into the new estate. Could you provide for space for outreaching social worker teams to serve the residents? I'm also concerned about the ICCMW. There's a lot of need for people suffering from mental diseases. Many residents, have nowhere to go to for help. The temporary offices in Choi Lam Estate, again, is rather a remote location. According to the SWD website for the ICCMW, the official site is in Kwun Tong. So one can see that your plan simply does not match the needs of the community. I hope the SWD will think about this further. We've also talked a lot about the newly commissioned PRH estates. For people who move into these PRH estates, and with the change in the population mix, will the Housing Department and the SWD help these people who are moving into the new estates? We've heard from district councillors and assistants who have told us that the residents don't know anything and where to go for help when they move in. Originally, they may approach the district councillors. So in Cheung Kwan O, the government has proposed that there will be 5 sites for housing development, PRH development, and there's another area earmarked for PRH estates catering for 100,000 people. So when the government plans for these developments, I hope they will also make provisions for welfare facilities. It is now time for the administration to respond, and I'll invite each of the departments to respond. And they would include the SWD, for example, where can we actually promote the model of the on-top estate, support from the disabled, a 5-year social worker team, and not the 3-year CIF, but a 5-year, recurrent social worker teams. For the Housing Department, of course, we are concerned about the public transport services and also officers for the social worker teams within the PRH estates. We heard that there are 5 different organizations serving on top, but they don't have their own premises. Why is that? But even if they have office, they're just using the office of the MAC. There's no toilets. They have to go to a public toilet. And it's not an isolated case, and it's going to be so for the next 3 to 5 years. So while we're grateful for your discretion, but there are still some problems yet to be addressed. For the Education Bureau, we're concerned about children having to change schools when they move to the new estates. One parent told us that she has to wake up at 6:30, and this is a problem that she has to face for the next 2-3 years. For new PRH estates, we understand that the children who move in there will have many educational needs that they simply cannot cope with. Okay, if I may now ask the SWD first of all to respond. Thank you. I'd like to thank the deputations for their views. Before any new PRH estate is commissioned, the District Social Welfare Office will be responsible for coordinating with the stakeholders in the district, including the district councillors, relevant government departments such as the Housing Department and the Education Bureau, as well as the organizations providing social welfare services within the community. We will coordinate with all these stakeholders and plan the strategies to help those people who will be moving into the new PRH estates and to help them cope or adapt to the new environment and to provide them with information about the availability of welfare and other support services. Sometimes we would organize activities to help the new residents know more about the community. For any new PRH estates and when we complete any PRH project, we would have support from the CIIF to organize, projects to provide community support, to help the new residents to build up a network of mutual assistance. For the Anderson Road Development Project, we have 5 NGOs which have applied to be part of the project. Some will be supported by the CIIF, some will be supported by others funds. But whatever the source of the support, the SWD will support such projects. In Kai Chung and Tuk Long, we have 2 projects funded by the CIIF. At Sui Chiong Estate, there are also 2. At Hong Fong Estate, there was 1. So we agree that within these new PRH estates, the new residents need support so that they can adapt to the new community earlier. And if they have long-standing welfare needs, again, under these projects, social worker colleagues can refer them for, mainstream services. It's true that for these services, each phase is for 3 years. But if it is discovered that there are new needs in that community, as I said, during the intake stage, residents will move in stages. And during the intake, we will be able to, know about the profile of these new residents. And initially, we will adjust our strategies after we've known about the profiles of these residents. And after the end of the 3-year period, the NGOs can apply to the CIIF again to add new elements into the project. That is, if they've identified any new needs during the last 3 years, they can apply for funding. So they don't have to wait for the end of the 3 years. So this is how we operate at the moment. Of course, if there are other funds to support such welfare initiatives, and we can certainly recommend or other funds to provide support as well. Regarding social worker teams within the estates, according to the Community Network Support Scheme, they are already working on this model of social worker teams. At Anderson, Ontario, and in the 2 estates, we are already doing that. Regarding the need for premises, we understand the Housing Department has been most helpful. They have actually made available some MAC offices for the use of these welfare organizations, who could then use them as offices to meet with the residents. And they've also made available other premises so that even if the welfare organizations do not have an office yet, they can still help the residents. For such a project, which is serving the residents in the district, we will work closely with the Housing Department about the need for premises by these welfare organizations, so that you will be able to, focus on serving the residents. Some deputations also asked whether we could allow some NGOs to provide service at an earlier stage. I've already explained the procedure earlier. For some of the newly built estates and estates of which intake is about to start, we would compress the timetable for invitation for provision of service and vet these proposals to determine which organization will be chosen to provide service.
上咧，如果我哋都仍然係舉翻即係安達臣道。
For Anderson Road, there's an elderly neighborhood center as well as an integrated youth services center, and the operators have been providing outreach services even before the intake. In terms of rehab services, on whether they are provided at our new estates. For on-tie estates at Anderson Road, we have an integrated services complex, and we have several service units for PWDs, including a care home for the severely handicapped and a hostel for the severely physically handicapped, a home for the moderately mentally handicapped, a skill center, as well as a special childcare center. So this is for the entire Kwun Tong or Kowloon East, right? Not specifically for on-tie estate. For care home services, all residents in Hong Kong can use them, and of course that includes the residents of on-tie and on-tie estate. At Shui Chu No Estate, we have a children's home for the mildly mentally handicapped, as well as a skill center for the mildly mentally handicapped. Can you provide the details in writing? Since time is limited, I must allow the two other departments to respond as well, and I believe there will be follow-up questions. Housing Department, please. Thank you. I'd like to thank the views of deputations as well. In terms of the provision of social welfare services, the housing authority will try to meet the needs of residents. In the design phase of a new housing estate, we will talk to the relevant departments and consult the public and district councils. We will also comply with the Hong Kong PSG and the relevant planning and buildings ordinances. Some deputations talked about on-tie estate, and there's an MAC office which is currently given to service providers for operation, and in the future intake of on-tie estate, we will identify a similar MAC office for their use. For on-tie estate, the intake is in July. I'm referring to the remaining Site B. So when can you locate an office for them at on-tie estate? The intake has just started, so we will talk to the district managers in order to identify a suitable MAC office for NGOs. Mr. Mok, do you have anything to add? For on-tie estate, the intake of Phase 1 started last month. The NGOs have been included in the intake process, and a room has been allocated for the NGOs to store their materials, and they can meet the tenants. And well, the space is rather big, and it comes with a washroom. So we have given them space to store their materials and meet residents, and there's some privacy as well. I'd like to thank them for their support, and well, they would conduct surveys or questionnaires there, and they will follow up on the views of residents later. Can the assistant director tell us about the pilot scheme at Tin Shui Wai and why it wasn't continued for that program? It was implemented for quite some time, and possibly due to other reasons, the service was suspended. If there's a need in the future, the housing department will be happy to help. Of course, there are other considerations. My question is what those considerations are. And now I invite the Education Bureau to address the questions. I'd like to talk about the provision of school places for the new residents. If parents need to move their children to another school because of moving homes, they can make inquiries directly to the schools, and the EDB can also offer referral services. Based on the district of residence and provision of school places, we will offer referral services. I realize that parents want to know more about schools in their district, so through the housing department, we will distribute pamphlets when they move in, as well as contact points. So hopefully parents would know what kind of support the EDB can give. We will also work closely with social welfare service providers, and they can help disseminate useful information for us. Briefings or information days have been arranged for parents who want to transfer their students. And we will try to offer them help and identify schools with vacant places. The EDB will continue to monitor the provision of school places, and if needed, we will offer flexibility in introduce more school places for the residents. What about the school transfer services? What are they specifically about? Are you just providing contact points or phone numbers? In the district, we will provide information on vacant school places, and if necessary, we can make referral requests, and we will offer referral services as needed. So are you going to really help instead of just providing pamphlets and contact points? We have a counter set up to know more about their needs. What about the expo? Are you the organizer, or the provisional service is a regular responsibility of the EDB? Now the floor is open for questions from members. Dr. Lau Siu Lai, Mr. Kwai Keung, Ms. Eunice Yong, Mr. Leung Kwok Hong, and Mr. Leung Yu Chong, and Mrs. Regina Yip, as well as the Vice Chairman. 4 minutes each, please. Dr. Lau Siu Lai, thank you. The media has been asking me whether there's a lack of unity among the pan-democrats. I think the answer is no. I think the unity is even worse within the government, because after the population intake at new housing estates, the facilities often took a few more years to complete or open. And the result is that the facilities are behind schedule for a few years. Since April, we realized that the work can be sped up, so I'd like to thank you for that. But I still do not see why it took 7 months for the auxiliary facilities and units to be provided after intake. As deputation said, the 7-month period is crucial. So is there any way you can speed up your work? If 7 months is necessary, then why can't you come up with temporary houses or buildings so that they can still provide services? Why isn't that possible? Apart from these social welfare facilities, the overall planning is very bad. We have seen problematic planning at many housing estates, as deputation said. Why are there no wet markets? We looked at the 9th estate in Taipo at Legislative this year. The planning was very bad, or Taipo Area 9. Can we have 40 to 50 market stalls for every 10,000 people? Even though, even if the planning department has reserved land, the coordination with other departments is very bad. In Tongchong East, you have more than 100,000 people, but hospital services have not been improved. So this is about the collaboration between different departments. How can you enhance collaboration between different departments? Thank you. Any response from the government? On the 7-month period, in our information to the welfare panel, we said that at the latest, the facilities and services must be commenced. I'd like to explain why a 7-month period is needed. After the operators receive an occupation permit, workers can begin renovation works. If the works are straightforward, they won't take 7 months. But for more complicated works, or if the facilities require certain licenses, then more time is needed. So that's why we said that at the latest, services would be commenced after 7 months. I think this is not just about renovation works. I think you are shifting the responsibility on the NGOs. Can the entire exercise begin earlier? So during the construction, you should complete the renovation for them. So during that period, are you going to provide another or other premises for the service providers? Apart from social welfare facilities, why is the planning for wet markets, schools, etc. so poor? On the 10th of April, members also suggested the same. We did look at the possibility if the renovation works are to be done during the construction, then we had to identify the service operators 5 or 6 years ahead. Even then, the operators had to provide designs and plans earlier. But as you know, services are always evolving, and the mode of service might change every few years. So if we had complete the renovation years ahead, and if we need to restore the works, then it will take extra time. Why can't the works take place at the same time? We are talking about welfare facilities. The layouts have to fit the services provided. For example, in a youth center, a few years back, nowadays we have band rooms, so we have tried to expedite the timeline in order to speed up the work.
Well, he's given a very long answer. I understand you've compressed the timetable, but it still requires 7 months, and you say you can't change that. Well, like what the deputation suggested, could you provide them with some temporary offices? And it's not just that you need to provide them with shelter. You need to provide for other ancillary facilities like wet markets and so on. For sometimes the welfare organization concerned may have other officers in the vicinity, such as the neighborhood centers for the elderly. They can use the facilities in the vicinity to provide outreaching services, even they don't have any premises yet in the new estate. Next, Mr. Kok Wai Kung. I'd like to thank the deputations for coming here to tell us about the problems facing these new PRH estates. The relocation on the part of the residents would bring about concerns and worries. The department said, firstly, that, well, they said two things. The questions, first of all, has the housing department provided enough space for them? We've told that the government has to follow standards. But have these standards been able to change with the times? The Deputy Director of Welfare said that there are services available and that the CIF is responsible for providing for such services. But the problem is that when you have a new PRH estate being built or completed, shouldn't the SWD has planned for the provision of service earlier? Why do you need to rely on others? Why can't you, starting from day one of the intake, to provide services? Why is it that the SWD is actually, staying in the background rather than, you doing the work at the front line? As for the housing department, I have visited some old PRH estates. I found out that many of the community facilities, their main entrance is separate from the entrance of the residents. It's at the back. So for the Kai Fongs to look for these welfare facilities, unless, like myself, I walk around the different parts of the estates, I would know my way about. So has the social welfare department provide for such community information to tell the residents, for example, that the center that they were looking for is right at the back of the block in which they live? We are also very concerned that the deputations are concerned that you may be using some facilities which could be used for welfare facilities to be used for housing development. At Wafu, for example, the original site is now reduced from 18 to 13 sites, and you are proposing to build housing units on top of the service complex. So it would mean that there will be no room for further development for the welfare facilities. Well, my experience is that the premises for welfare organizations very often are placed next to RCPs. Let me first answer Mr. Kwok's question as to whether or not we're actually only working in the background or providing background support. As I said before, the commissioning of any PRH estates, our district office will coordinate with the stakeholders, including relevant departments, district councils, and the NGOs operating in the district. So we'll work together to find out what services we can offer to the new residents moving in. For example, we work with the housing department And every time you have intake for a new PRH estate, when they, receive the key, before they receive the keys into the premises, we will organize briefings for them so that they would know what facilities and services are available within that community and who are the people they can approach. At least they would know whom to approach. And the CIF would also be involved. And the SWD would recommend the welfare organizations to serve the residents. Colleagues, we have 7 members yet to speak. If each member speak for 4 minutes, we would overrun, we'll go beyond 12:15. So even if I extend the meeting by 15 minutes, I would like to ask members to agree that we extend that meeting by yet another 10 minutes. So we may be running until 12:25. There won't be a second round. I hope members would agree that, accept that we finish our meeting at 12:25. Ms. Yong Hoi-yin, Chairman, I think we set a very good topic for our discussion, estate-based, social welfare, planning. We're now into 2017. I think the government has been too slow, especially that we have available such a lot of data available and mature IT technology. We've conducted so many household surveys. Why can't you be more forward-looking? First of all, conduct a survey about the population profile for new PRH estates and then decide on what resources you will provide for them before the intake. Many deputations are complaining there are not enough resources, or after the intake they don't get the services they want. The government should be more forward-looking. You should first have proper population planning. The housing department certainly would know how many households will move into the estate, the size of the households, the age profile, how many single-parent families, how many children. They would know beforehand. There's no reason they don't. So I'd like to ask the government whether they have such data, and if so, would they share that such data with the SWD so that they would deploy resources to plan for the services. I think you should plan first, reserve the premises, and then allocate resources, and then proceed to promotion before the intake. It's not like Mr. Lam said, you let the people move in first, and then you decide whether or not the accommodation is right, and then you will decide whichever organization move in. I understand the government is applying the Hong Kong planning standards and guidelines in planning for the welfare facilities or welfare organizations to move into a PH estate. But that's not too flexible, and it's not humanistic. I understand that for many integrated family service centers, centers for youths and so on. But at this age, very often residents need professional services for single parents, people, planning for divorce, and everything, minorities. If we still adopt the, operate according to the old model when we do the planning, that is not humanistic enough. Secondly, I'd like to talk about education. I'm concerned about Shui Chino Estate. I understand that there's a serious, located in the area 91 Sha Tin. There's a serious shortage of school places. Intake was started in 2011. The primary schools will only be complete in 2021. So does it mean that if you have 30 people moving into a new estate, there won't be a primary school or any education facilities? Thank you. Housing Department. Let me answer the question relating to planning, first of all. In our plan, we would have information regarding the projected population size that will be moving in, because we have planned for 1-room, 2-bedroom, units, and then we would follow the Hong Kong planning and standard and guidelines to plan for the provision of facilities accordingly. As I said, we would follow the government's policies in the provision of welfare facilities. The question is that when you have such data, would you share them with the SWD? And when the SWD receives such information, would they share them with the NGOs? So would you, share such information with the welfare department? After the SWD has received the information, would they be willing to share that with the NGOs? We'll be happy to do that. Next, provision of school places in Seichuno. At Seichuno Estate, let me talk about the school network. We divided the whole territory into 5 networks. The planning for secondary schools is territory-wide, so we do not have any school networks. Seichuno falls within area school network 91. According to the current information for 2017-2018, we still have school places to cater to the children who need to change schools, but there are not that many places. So if there's a need for children who need to change schools, we can refer them to other school networks in the vicinity, Taiwan 88 and area network 89, where there are more abundant school places available for children who need to change schools. Mr. Leung Yiu Chung, Chairman. The director said that when you have intake into a new estate, you will, explain to the residents when they obtain the keys to the unit about the facilities that will be available. So the question is, you should be able to provide immediate service. I have the experience that in one estate, when the people received the keys, the residents already needed to look for help. So if you're not able to provide them with the service there and then, letting them what service will be available in the future doesn't help. Many social worker teams already said that they would like to be able to serve the residents at that stage. But if they don't give them the facilities, they can't be stationed in the estate, and therefore they can't serve the residents. That's the biggest problem. So could you do this? That is, while you're providing information to the residents moving in, you should be able to immediately serve them. That is, there should be social worker teams there in the estate. There should be an office where the residents can find these social workers. And secondly, for the schools, at Kwai Lin Estate, we're told that the children need to go to school to a different district. Do children need to go to schools in a different district before the problem could be resolved? Because we want children to be able to go to school within their own district. Even if people accept that children have to go to other districts to school, the transport facilities are not in place to facilitate that. Although the housing department may not know about the age profile of the residents moving in, but according to experience, you should be able to guess, how many such children are there, and then you would know where these children go to school. Then you have to consider how you can ensure that children will have planned transport to go to the schools they attend. You can't expect children to go to school from Hong Shui Kiu to Yuen Long. You have to tell them how they can do that. That you should provide them with sufficient transport, facilities. But that's not the case at the moment. We're also very concerned that in order to reduce the long waiting time for PRH units, you are focusing on increasing the provision of PRH units at the expense of social welfare services. So in order to provide for more PRH units, you are sacrificing these welfare facilities. Otherwise, you should have standards, relating to the number of welfare facilities in proportion to the populations. there need to be a standard. Otherwise, you would simply keep telling us that there won't be enough, room or space. Can you guarantee that these service units will be given premises? And do you have a policy that priority is given to building PRH units, residential units, and there won't be priority for these welfare facilities? SWD or housing could sponsor. The CIF will sponsor 3-year projects which fund but it doesn't cover the provision of premises.
As we said, we will work with the housing department on the provision of venues. And indeed, there might be a need for having an office in the estates. And on Mr. Leung's points, first of all, we have other welfare providers in the district, so they are able to offer services. When an applicant applies for the neighborhood support program, we will try to arrange teams as soon as possible so they can carry out early intervention. What about transportation? On transportation and other measures, in the design phase of a new estate, we would get in touch with the relevant departments like the TD on what transport services would be offered. And by the time of intake, we will continue to meet them in order to satisfy residents' needs. And the number of residential units depend on the maximum allowable GFA. And for the welfare facilities, they have stopped another set of standards for non-rental housing premises. The EDB knows where people go to school. So how about the transportation and other measures? EDB, please. Please be brief. Education Bureau. In terms of planning, the EDB adopts the approach of school clusters at Hongshui Q. It belongs to network number 72, and 12 schools serve that area. Because of different reasons, not all parents can send their children to a school nearby. So some children have to go to school in another district. Apart from the measures mentioned by the housing department, we will discuss with schools and parents whether school service can be arranged. So that way we can take care of different needs from students. Mr. Leung Kwok Hong, Mrs. Regina Yip, and the Vice Chairman, Dr. Fernando Chang, Michael Tian, and Ms. Elvin Yang. Mr. Leung Kwok Hong. The speaker is not coming through. Well, apparently the residents expect to have a better life when they move homes. Just like the biblical story of Moses and or the Exodus. But now there is nothing. That's what Xi Jinping and Carrie Lam said we should stop our political battles. When the Development Bureau gave you the housing site, there would be a lot of planning involved. The housing department should know what was going on. And after the intake, the facilities were still lacking. For example, community and welfare services. And you talked about borrowing the office of the MAC, and that space would be given for storage. In other words, they won't get an office. So where's the privacy? When residents seek help, they would not have any. They would not enjoy any privacy. You said you can utilize big data. The same goes for education. 5 years ago, there was a child who goes to school in Kennedy Town, and he lives in Taipo. And we had another case of a Tongchong child going to school in Island East, and you talked about regular services, but you are saying that you are carrying out checks, but you said everything is okay, and you will continue to look into the cases. I cannot believe what I heard from you. And if you put a mark on a sword, there's no way you can locate it, and you are being too passive. You continue waiting, and you would wait until people are too tired to make complaints. I have nothing more to say. Can they share with us their workflow? They said an occupation permit is required before renovation, and if licenses are needed, more time is needed. Can you give us the full picture of the workflow? On average, how much time is needed? Give us a detailed report. The same goes for hospitals. Have you estimated the increase in healthcare demand because of the intake? Have you considered building clinics at least? And opposite Anderson Estate and near Tak Long Estate, you are spending $39.1 billion for the sports park, or the Kai Tak Sports Park, and you are building a 50,000 seater with a retractable roof. If you use that site for something else, then the problem would go away. Thank you. No, members, you can see that members are concerned whether this is a modern version of the Exodus. If Moses failed to reach his destination, well, I'm saying that no one would like the government. You are like Moses, and you are the chosen one. Mrs. Regina Yip, thank you very much. I'd like to thank the deputations for offering their views. From the deputations and government, we can see that the government would consult stakeholders, and the CCF can help offer services. But we can see that the intervention from the government is way too late, and the welfare services are lacking at estates. The Society for Protection of Children told me that there's a severe shortage of services for those aged 0 to 3, and that has affected employment for women. What does your plan look like? The Tuen Mun District Councillors complained that the NT West hospitals are all full and the waiting time for A&E is very long. You should have community clinics and care centers. Your plans should have been updated. The population intakes are concentrated in U.S. states compared with Northeast NT, Hongshui, Kiu, Yunnan, South, etc. Will you update your plans ASAP so that each estate will have complete facilities? There's a shortage of child care services, community care services for the mentally handicapped, and so on. Can the government be more forward-looking in their policy? Deputy Director, please. On child care services, starting from next year, we will open child care centers for those aged under 3 at Shunlei Estate. We will have 92 places for those aged 3 and below. And at Shunlei Estate and at Waming Estate, we will have a child care center with 56 places. We will continue to work hard and we will pay attention to child care in our future planning. Can I go on record? I know that the HD cannot tackle this problem, but for the land sales at new development areas, I think terms or requirements should be put in place. You can you might receive less, but it doesn't really matter for the government. At Area 32 of Taipo, Sai Kung, South District, and Kwai Ching, there is severe shortage. So I think we can talk about those later. Well, about the care facilities, everyone flocks to the hospitals and we lack healthcare professionals. According to Dr. Koh, the shortage is 2,600, but I think according to the professionals, the shortage is even higher. So can you have more care centers and centers for PWDs and the mentally handicapped? Can you introduce some new thinking, like what the new CE said? For PWDs, we have home care services. There would be OT, PT. So we will step up our efforts in the future. As other members said, there are community care services for the elderly as well as PWDs and the mentally handicapped. I think time is about up. Mr. Yip, the child home places would be discussed next Monday. I'm talking about child care and daycare services. I'm not talking about children's homes. Vice Chairman, thank you. We have an open hearing today. Because I want to align the Social Welfare Department with the deputations. And planning always takes place after the intake, which is very poor planning. The reality is that the departments are taking their time and the residents are suffering. I was in Tin Shui Wai North and there was nothing, no facilities. Back then at Tin Shui Wai North, there was nothing. And there was an empty ground with nothing on it. If we do not give them anything, then people would have to spend their childhoods on this empty site, and we hope lessons will be learned for future intakes. Can we do something simultaneously? By the time the new population arrives, they would enjoy the facilities. I read McDowell comics when I was small, and McDowell said he would spend 24 hours breathing, 24 hours waiting, and he would run out of time. But the reality is you can do different things at the same time. So by the same token, different departments can work simultaneously, and you can be more forward-looking and do better.
Furthermore, for the new PRH estates to be built in the future, should you earmark space for provisional facilities? For the old PRH estates, if you want to add any facilities for service for the mentally retarded children, so on, or elderly services, you have to ensure there's no objection from district councils and residents. I used to, I had once applied for welfare facilities, and I had to get the consent of the residents before I could promote, the service of serving those who are mentally disabled. Before the intake to a new PRH estates, could you earmark 1 or 2 floors for elderly services, and then also reserve some space for services which might turn out to be controversial later on? So you shouldn't be asking the frontline social workers to work, in makeshift accommodation. Of course, what they are doing is really commendable. But nowadays, with the information available to the department, could they ensure that there will be sufficient resources and facilities for them to serve the residents? I emphasize once again, it's not very good to be a pioneer, and you must improve on the situation. That you shouldn't, continue with this model of, intake before planning. Could you do planning before the population intake? I must add that when I talk about intake before planning, basically for all our planning for any PRH estates, whatever public facilities or community facilities or welfare facilities we put into the estate, even if a site is available for us, we would have already decided on that already. Because, but today we are discussing for whether these facilities which have been planned, whether we could make them available to serve the residents when the residents move in, so that they can operate within the designated premises, rather than only to deciding where we should provide for these services after intake. Members, we still have 3 more members who have yet to speak, so we will take another 12 minutes. That would go beyond 12:25. Would members allow 3 more, those 3 or 4 members to speak, and my conclusion before we end, and that will probably take us to 12:35. Dr. Fernando Jones. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you all the deputations for coming here to express their views on estate-based welfare services planning. I think this is something that we should be ashamed about for the PRH estates in Hong Kong. We have so many years of experience. The Housing Department now manages more than 200 estates. Why is it even now? People need to, behave like pioneers when they move into new estates like Shui Chung O, Kai Ching, and those in NT-West, such as those in Hong Shui Kiu. One characteristic is that once you get in to these estates, you have lead-tainted drinking water, no provision of wet markets, inadequate transport facilities, and absence of any welfare facilities, and there's not even proper pedestrian, facilities. The major, road in Seychelles was not even commissioned. So the Housing Department has experience managing more than 200 PRH estates. The SWD, the Education Bureau, and even now you talk about networks and clusters. All these estates have their own unique characteristics. Ontat and Seychelles are located on top of a hill. In Seychelles, there's not a single primary school or center for young people. It's an estate accommodating 30,000 people. Intake will be completed this summer. It's an estate with the largest number of children, and the government is is simply ignoring their needs. There's no wet markets, and the residents have to fend for themselves. If the water is tainted with lead, they have to go up to the hills and collect water from the streams. So don't try to pass the buck. I think the way you answered Dr. Lausalai's question is really unacceptable. Years ago, almost 20 years ago, in Tung Chung, we had a new model. Before the residents moved in, the welfare facilities were already there, operating. 20 years hence, you're now telling us that you have to wait until the population permit is issued, that we have the residents have to wait for another 7 months. 20 years ago, we were able to do it. It's just that we're not willing to continue with that model. So you're not putting priority on the needs of residents. You just stick to your own bureaucratic ways. You just find whatever is more convenient to you, and then you will call tender, slowly. If the residents are not getting the service, they can go outside for help. Is that what you're telling us? Even now, after managing more than 200 estates, what lessons have you learned? Why is it even now people have to, behave like pioneers? Aren't you not able to learn from experience? Do you have any, problems with learning from experience? You've never really think about these issues from the perspective of the residents. You're just bureaucrats. You just do your own job, and it is only your job not really to serve the residents. Right? Tell us, for Seychelles Estate, when will there be a center for young people? For the Seychelles Estate, it's on the top of a hill. At the slope of the hill, there is an organization operating a center for young people, and some adults are also getting service there. But if young people, children want to go down to the slope of the hill, it's not convenient. So in August, at Seychelles Estate, we will be setting up a branch office of the center, operating the center for the young people, so the young people will get service there. So you're setting up a sub-office at Seychelles Estate. Michael Tin. 4 minutes. I have 2 questions. First of all, many social workers are present here today among the deputations. I'm more concerned about lots of people, many people saying that many housing department officers are deferring the work they should do to social workers, thus adding to the workload. So the social welfare department is saying it's your responsibility and it's not ours. So it's really a waste of resources. So is this really true? Have they referred any workload to you which they should have done themselves? For example, serious family problems and so on. And secondly, this is for the government. I'm particularly concerned about singletons who are elderly living in these PRH estates. There will be more and more of them in future. At Potin Estate, There have been several incidents where single elderly persons have died and nobody knew about it, and people would then regard the units they've vacated as haunted, and people don't want to move in. So I think you should have technology available to monitor these elderly people who are living alone. It's the same in our office. And then if you detect any abnormality, you should check the following day. The social worker cannot call upon these elderly singletons every day. And these elderly persons are also very lonely. For all senior citizens living alone, if a social worker called them, say, at least once every 2 days, actually, I have an aunt who is 100 years old. If I could call her up every day, she would be very happy. She doesn't need to see me. Just listen to my voice she'll be very happy. But no such services are available because housing department would need to provide the information to the SWD before it could be done. So would you consider, for the elderly resident living alone, you can arrange for social workers to contact them from time to time? So this is my concern. It's not about new estates. We're talking about going forward, there will be more and more such elderly persons living alone. So the social workers can answer my first question, the SWD answer the second question. Are there any social work colleagues who can tell us that the SWD is actually dumping the work they should have done onto the shoulders of the social workers? Mr. Ng. I don't know, Mr. Ng is referring to the new estate we talk about. Our social work colleagues will be happy to help the residents who are referred to us by the housing department. This is all I can say. Thank you. Many social workers have shared their experience with us. I think to answer Mr. Ng's question, for our frontline social workers, I think the government officials could have given the information to the welfare agency, the NGOs providing welfare service so that they can contact the kai fongs. Some colleagues, for example, had wanted to go to a new PRH estate to serve the senior citizens, but they don't have a name list of these senior citizens. And such information could be with the SWD or the HD. So if you provide such information to the welfare agencies, it will be able to help them to contact the senior citizens or new families who need the service. So in other words, there's a lot of things that you want to do, but you can't do it at the moment. It's not really the case that very good. Okay, next I'd like the administration to answer well, they've already answered that question already. The housing department will pass on the information to the SWD, which will share them with the NGOs, whether it's EM, singletons living alone, and so on. Could you provide better service for elderly persons living alone? Earlier on, we organized a gerontology, for exhibition to promote technology to help people to age in place, and certainly that is a direction we will take going forward. For elderly living alone, we would obtain information from the HD. In a particular estate, if you have one single elderly or couples who are elderly living in these PRH units, at the elderly centers, we have a support team for the elderly, where they would, visit or call up these elderly residents. What is the standard? How frequently would they call them up? If we don't have a standard, it's all empty talk. Normally every month they will try to call them up just once a month. For example, on Monday, the welfare panel will be talking about ESPP. We can follow up. I think you can call them up once, 2 days. It will only take 5 minutes. Shouldn't take up too much of our resources. We can certainly, talk to the, the organizations as to how we can improve on that.
At the new development at Anderson Road, 5 NGOs would provide community support and network. One of them works on elderly services, and we hope they can focus on elderly people who live alone. I think you should have more regular services. In terms of technology, can you introduce technology in the homes of elderly people living alone so that they won't go missing without people knowing? Ms. Alvin Young. Chairman, I see time is limited, so perhaps I would wait till Monday before I ask my questions. We have a lot of social workers here today. I think we have to look at a fundamental question. And with the completion of new estates, a lot of vacant areas in the estates have been used for table tennis tables. Of course, there's a need for table tennis tables, but if we do not have enough space for service units, can the relevant spaces be used for small buildings or small centers? Would that be an option? This is something we see very often at new housing estates. Again, about the offices of service units. SWD, please. Thank you. You might think that the vacant units are not in use, but they do have their purposes. These vacant spaces are for table tennis tables or other purposes. If the so-called vacant spaces can be converted to buildings or offices, then there are things we would do, and there have been examples in the past. But that said, we have to comply with the legal requirements, buildings ordinance or planning requirements, and so on. If everything is feasible, we would convert them into offices or other uses. Chairman, you said if possible they would be converted. Who would take the initiative? Is it the NGOs or the government? Would the government conduct a review from time to time? I just want to know the workflow. Both are possible. Sometimes NGOs would take the initiative. Does it mean that NGOs can write to the government if they see a need? When they identify suitable spaces, what should they do? Is there any formula or fixed procedures? Now they have to approach legislators, and we will write to the government and so on. So that's how it works now. We will be flexible in our approach. I'm just afraid that, well, I think what he said is that they will not do anything. Can deputations share their experiences? In the past, we looked for a service unit in Tung Chung, but we approached the housing department, but they wouldn't give us the site even though they are left vacant, and they said there would be other purposes or that they were earmarked for other units and so on. But they refused to let us use it. We were forced to rent some ground floor units in other housing estates. Do you have any service unit in Tongchong? We have no permanent address. We are from the Tongchong Alliance for Social Development. There's a lot I want to follow up on, including the subbase of Surgeonal Estate. Have you introduced extra manpower, or are you just providing a subbase for children? We have been talking about a 5-year social worker team. It's not under the CIF, but a separate 5-year social worker team. Is that possible? If there are service needs, why are you asking NGOs to prove after 3 years then there would be a need? So these problems still exist. So a bigger issue is not just about planning. It's about public transportation, wet markets. We have all sorts of problems. But a common theme is that government intervention is too late and too little. Mr. Guo Kang asked whether the intervention from SWD is too little, and or whether the intervention is too late. And these are some recurring themes. We hope the department can think about that. Well, are there learning difficulties by the government, like what Dr. Fernando Chang said, or else why are we seeing the same problems over and again? Would you like to provide a response? If not, please be brief. Housing Department, Education Bureau, SWD, no? If not, I hope you realize the problems. Or else in the new estates we will have no markets, no bus routes, no service units, no ATMs. They will have nothing. We will see a repeat in the future. So we will have another meeting on the welfare panel on Monday. I'd like to thank the deputations. Your views have been noted. The SWD, HC, and EDB have heard you. Thank you. The meeting is adjourned.